Good morning and welcome to Math with Mr. Connally. It's good to see you today. What we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you through graphing relations, functions, and I'm going to give you a preview of your unit activity, which you'll have to do tomorrow. I want to make sure that you're prepared to be able to do your work today. So, before we go any further, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to get information about future videos. Okay, let's look at graphing relations. Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to be talking about graphing relations. And in the lesson, you'll identify variables in real-world situations and model the relationships graphically. Okay, so if you go through all the contents, we'll talk about linear relationships, piecewise linear relationships, and then the activity is on the piecewise linear relations. Okay, so you learn the difference between a relation and a function. And then we'll go through and we'll talk about these verbal descriptions and then the different linear relationships. Remember, a linear relationship is when it makes a straight line. And there's something called the independent variable, that's usually the x, and the dependent variable, which is the y value. So the input is the independent variable and the output is the dependent variable. Okay, so we'll go through and you'll be looking at all these. Please note right here, especially, this is a linear relationship. This is also a proportion. Remember, we talked about this a lot in 7th and 8th grade. A proportion has a constant rate of change. So in this case, it is going up $12 for every 1 hour. And that relationship looks like a triangle. It's a rise over the run. That's called the slope, which we'll do in the next exercise, or the next video. Okay, also notice that this origin was 0, that's making it a proportion. So it starts at 0 and it's a straight line. And they have an example. They'll go through those with you. And then if we skip on over to the end, we're talking about relationships, or relations show the relationship between a pair of two things. If they make a straight line, then they can be a function, but also they have to pass what's called a vertical line test. And that means that for every x, there's exactly one y value. All right, so let's look at the next one. You have to do functions. Okay, this is where we'll talk a little bit more about what makes a function. And we'll talk about relations versus functions, vertical line test, and then we'll talk about something called domain and range. So they'll take you through, they'll talk about the variables again, independent, dependent, and now we'll do something called domain and range. Domain is the x values in a graph, and the range is the y values. Notice to be a function, a relation, which is just a relationship between an x and a y value, has to have exactly one range. So each domain has at least one range. Okay, so this x has a y, this x has one y, this x has a y, and this x has a y. Okay. And then there's different ways you can show it through graph, mapping, table, and list of ordered pairs. You need to be able to identify those and see if it makes a function or not. Okay, so identifying them, they'll talk about that here. And then notice this one is a function on the left, but it's not a function on the right, and that's because this x right here has two different y values. Okay, I like to think of it like the x's are a woman and the range is a man, and according to this world of this analogy, each woman can have only exactly one husband. So this x has one husband, this x has one husband. This x has one husband here and one husband there. She's not faithful. That means it's not a function. Okay, it's a silly little analogy that I have. Don't think of it as some sort of social commentary or anything. It's just a way to help remember. So if you look over on the left one, each woman has, this woman has one husband, this woman has one husband, this woman has one husband. Even though they're the same husband, this guy has got a dual identity or something, it's still a function because each x has exactly one y. And when you graph those, it'll make sense because you'll do something called a vertical line test to do that. Okay, so you can use my silly analogy to help you. If they're not faithful, then it's not a function. Okay, and then the vertical line test, we'll talk about how that works. And then they'll talk about domain and range. And again, domain's the x and the range is the y value. And talk about, so these are the lists of all the domains. Now you have to find the ranges or the y values by substituting them into the equation and solving for y. Okay, and then they'll ask you some questions on that. And then in review, in summary, it talks about relations and functions, domain and range. Okay, so that's the gist of those two assignments. Now, I want to prepare you for tomorrow's unit activity. You won't be doing any assignments. You'll just be doing this unit activity. It's kind of like a free response type activity. So you'll be answering some questions, which I'll show you in just a second. So here's the objective. Okay, they'll give you a problem right here dealing with some plants, and it shows you how it's scored. And as you keep going, they're going to ask you questions, and you just need to answer them, and it breaks it down, the understanding of the problem. So you'll have to enter, sometimes you'll have to enter an equation, sometimes you'll have to do drag and drop, and then sometimes you have to fill in a table, and then answer a question again. And it's got a couple different parts. As we go down, you get to the last part, part C, where you have to explain the similarities and differences between the two relationships in this situation. Okay, so you actually have to write it out and use complete sentences. Do your best. This is the part I'm grading myself, so make sure that you are following the, look at the scoring rubric, make sure you filled in all the parts so that you can get a complete answer and 100%. Okay, finalize your assignment and then submit it for grading. Make sure you press save and exit, as you always should with these things, and I'll go ahead and grade that probably over the weekend and get that back to you as soon as possible. Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm here to help. Have a great day.